You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Monday, April 27th, 2020. This week on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we are going to be highlighting some amazing heroes throughout history. Now, last week, we talked about how God is not in control of every little thing, but he is always there. And even when terrible or very hard things happen in the natural world, like tsunamis or terrifying viruses, or terrible things happen in the human world, like evil dictators or oppression, that God might not be causing those things. In fact, he certainly is not causing them, but he is always there. And God is always able to use anything, no matter what it is, for his glory. This is why we have so many saints that died in the concentration camps that the Nazis created. The concentration camps were not part of God's will. They were terribly evil, and yet we have amazing saints and stories of faith and resilience in those terrible circumstances. Because if we allow him in, God can transform everything. So the heroes that we are going to be talking about this week are a very specific type of hero and heroes that we have been celebrating already. Now, you probably know that some of the greatest heroes serving us during this time of crisis and isolation are healthcare workers. Many people, especially those working directly with those affected by the coronavirus, have sacrificed a lot. They have not only sacrificed their potential health by getting very near to people who are sick, although I'm sure they have been very cautious, but they have also sacrificed time with their family. Many doctors and nurses have remained isolated from their families for fear of contagion and have devoted themselves completely to the care of strangers. Now, this is not something new. Throughout history, when a horrible disease or illness comes upon people and spreads just as the coronavirus spread, this is not the first time that we have had big illnesses spreading to many people. But every time this has happened, God has called up heroes. And of course, as Catholics, we call heroes saints. Because a saint does not just do heroic and amazing things for their own good so that people love them and like them and really think a lot of them. No, a saint does amazing, heroic things because of love. Remember, God is love. So the closer we get to God, the more time we spend in prayer, meditating on who he is, and really asking him to change us to be more like him. So the more time that we do that, the more we will become like him. We will be filled with love, and love can do incredible things. So this whole week is dedicated to all of the amazing people that continue to serve us in healthcare as we hopefully turn the corner and return to normal life, although their life will probably be busy and crazy for a while longer. So this week, we are going to look at amazing saints who also worked in healthcare. And this is another thing I want you to remember, friends. During this hard time, God has called up saints once again. Many of these stories we might not hear for years, and really a lot of the stories are probably hidden and we'll never know about them. But God has called up his saints. He has asked people to do amazing things, and he has, without a doubt, worked miracles through them. Our God is good. He can use any situation for his good. So let's just remember how good and amazing our God is in past illnesses and tragedies. Today, we are going to look at one of my all-time favorite saints, and this saint is named St. Martin de Porres. Now, we can talk a lot about St. Martin de Porres. You might know that he was from Peru, His mother was a freed African slave, and his father was a Spanish nobleman. So he was of mixed race, meaning he had two different parents of different races. His father never married his mother. And so not only were people racist against him because of the color of his skin, but they also looked down on him, thinking that he wasn't a very good guy because he didn't come from a very good family. But St. Martin de Porres, he really didn't care about that. He loved God. Now, at the time, St. Martin de Porres trained to be a barber. At the time, there weren't actually doctors, and the people that cut your hair actually were the ones that worked at healing as well. So when he was trained to be a barber, he also was trained in certain medical practices. Very soon, St. Martin de Porres came to be known as a healer. Miraculously, people would come to him for treatments. He would not only treat them, he would pray for them. And so many of them were healed. Now, this continued on. St. Martin de Porres wanted to go and be a monk, but because of the racist laws at the time, he wasn't allowed to. They didn't allow people with dark skin to become a monk. The best that he could hope for was to be a servant to a group of monks. And so joyfully he did that. For years, he was a servant to the monks, and he did all sorts of terrible jobs, like cleaning the rats out of a cellar or dealing with stinky latrines. This is what St. Martin de Porres did, but he did it with love. Also, while he was a servant, he worked in the infirmary. Now, in a monastery, the little group of sick monks would be sent to a certain area of the monastery called the infirmary. And since St. Martin had been trained as a barber or a doctor, he was sent there. Now, during the time when St. Martin lived, medicine was not nearly advanced as it is now, and it was not unusual for illnesses to break out. They didn't understand a lot, but they did understand that when you came in contact with a sick person, you often got sick yourself. So at one point, several of the monks in the monastery got ill, and more were getting ill. So out of fear, they locked these certain monks away in a corner of the monastery and just left them there, basically, for fear that the illness would spread. Now, St. Martin de Porres desperately wanted to go into this room and care for these monks, but they would not let him. They said, "You cannot go in there. You will get sick too. You cannot go in there. You will get us all sick." So one of St. Martin de Porres' most famous miracles was actually walking through locked doors. Other monks in the monastery witnessed him passing through a solid door to go and minister to the other monks. Now, St. Martin de Porres, his love knew no limits. And he also understood what it was like to be quarantined, which most of us now understand as well. St. Martin de Porres eventually was allowed to become a monk and take his vows. They overlooked the laws about race. He became a very holy man. Thousands of people attended his funeral. His casket was carried by priests and bishops. He was so well known and loved. But St. Martin de Porres would want himself to be remembered for just one thing, for love. It was his love that God responded to when he prayed for the needs of others. And it is this selfless love that has gotten us through this pandemic. And so, Sprouts, my challenge for you today is to remember those people who are terribly lonely and have had terribly lonely experiences over the course of the coronavirus. People that are quarantined, that can't get out, that are afraid. Can you please remember them in your prayers today? We aren't like St. Martin de Porres, and we can't pass through locked doors, but we can be like him and love these people and bring their needs to God. That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God created you to be. Just one more thing. If you are looking for more things for your kids to do in these long hours at home, We encourage you to head over to our website and check out our free library of digital resources for Catholic families. Totally free. All you have to do is subscribe, and you can find a link to do just that in the notes for this podcast episode.